This is a snowflake-free zone.
Cheef report. The Cheef report. The Cheef report.
This is a snowflake-free
Cheef
zone.
report. The Cheef report. The Cheef report.
This is a snowflake-free
Cheef
zone.
report. The Cheef report. The Cheef report.
This is a snowflake-free
Cheef
zone.
report.
Yep, I'm gonna do that over. Had myself muted. Sorry about that, people. Like I was saying, it looks like the Commie-crats have begun Convoy 2.0 with another herd of immigrants ready to storm our southern border. This time, the caravan originated from Honduras. Geronimo Gutierrez, Mexican ambassador to the U.S., says Mexico would do its part to keep the Honduran refugees from reaching our border. He says the first 7 refugees that reached Mexico have applied for refugee status in Mexico. Now, make no mistake about it, people. Commie-crats plan these mass migrations. Remember, Convoy 1.0 was strategically enacted days before Father's Day? Why? To pull at your heartstrings by making President Trump seem like a racist that tears immigrant children away from their parents. Many of these children were not even related to the adults they crossed the border with. Now, how do we know this? Because Jeff Sessions ordered DNA testing to protect those children from could-be smugglers. And we found out that many of those children were not related to the illegals they brought over. Now, with only 19 days until the most important midterm election in our lifetime, Commie-crats are at it again. Now, months have gone by, and neither party has touched immigration, legal or illegal. No wall yet. No DACA fix either. Now, speaking of DACA, some Republican legislators fear Donald Trump will make a deal with the Commie-crats to keep DACA recipients here in America in exchange for $25 billion for the wall should the Commie-crats take the House this year. Could that be the reason for Caravan 2.0? More on that in the new segment While You Were Distracted. Tonight on the Cheef Report, I will be joined by author of Trump Why He is Right for America, Kevin Monte de Ramos. We'll be discussing 2 chapters in his book, Build the Wall and Commander in Tweet. So let's get Kevin in here and see what the deal is. What's going on with you, Kevin? What's going on, man? You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. We hear you
So
just
sorry
fine,
about
man.
that.
I got
Okay,
a lot
guys,
of
I
layers
promise
up here.
you, I promise you, it's not going to be as bad as last time. That was my fault. But we're on air here. But I want to thank you for having me and providing me the opportunity to read from my book, because immigration was a very major component in our 2016 election. Democrats know that it is a non-winning issue in 2018, so they're not going to mention it. What they are going to mention is how America mistreats people that comes to its borders, and they're going to hope to sway you emotionally to cast a vote, or worse, just stay at home and do nothing.
Now, why do
And
you think
so,
it's a non-winning issue? Are you talking about for the Democrats or Republicans or both parties?
no, Democrats are saying the DNC is warning their Democratic candidates that don't talk about immigration because it's a non-winning issue. The majority of Americans, lots of statistics, do not want illegal immigration. In fact, Obama, when he was running, and back in 2008, he was actually against immigration. So was Hillary Clinton when she ran for for Senate. So everybody knows that, America believes people should come to our country legally. The problem is when you have people in this caravan coming across the border and they get to our border, well, law says we have to give them due process, and due process in America can take 6 months. And what do we do in the interim time? That's been the contention all along. So, I'm glad to have a president in President Trump that's willing to kind of stand up and say, you can't organize and come to our borders. So it's really important from our standpoint. I don't know if your listeners understand this, but it cost us more each year to maintain illegal immigrants than it would to build the wall. So if building the wall would actually save 4 times the amount we spend annually on sustaining illegal immigrations with government
Do you
benefits.
think the wall is going to be a total solid structure, or do you think some of it will be electronic, some of it using drones and other resources? Do you actually think that there's going to be one long wall?
The wall works where there are walls. The people coming to the borders at that point decrease significantly. We know that here from our own experiences where walls have been built, and in countries like Israel and Germany, the walls did work. So do I think it's going to be a full wall? I'm not sure I care, as long as the border's hardened. If there is a river that keeps you from crossing, so be it. If there's a mountain range or a edifice that prevents somebody from coming over, okay. But my preference would be, given the organization from connecting South America to North America, I think we need the wall on our southern border. I absolutely do, and I think it needs to be a physical structure.
What about the laws that are already on the books? Because it seems like some laws have changed to where now these people can actually come in here and know. I mean, they're trying to get caught. They're not trying to come over here and hide. They are trying to get caught because they know if they have a child with them that they're going to be let in and they're going to go through the process. What do you think about that?
Well, I think they're advertising. That's why they're marching over in caravans. This is no secret that you come to America. If you get to a point of entry, our laws require that you go through deep due process. Granted, 80% of those people that come here and seek a refugee status or protections under the U.S., 80% are turned away. But a judge just recently ruled that the American taxpayers has to pay their legal expenses in that interim, and that process can take 2 years.
What do you
So
think
you're right.
about what?
They
What do
want to
you
come to the border. They want to get caught. They are better treated, even in the detention facilities, than some of the countries they're escaping.
What do you think about the 9,000 immigrants that had their deportation cases thrown out? That was something I talked about yesterday on my new segment while you were distracted. Apparently, cases going back all the way to 2016, early 2016, when Obama was in office. Illegal immigrants that were served with papers to appear in court for deportation hearings, 9,000 of them got thrown out for basically clerical errors that included not having a date, time, and location of where these illegal immigrants were supposed to show up to court. Now, you know as well as I know, attorneys are smart enough to know that any legal document with clerical errors such as that is going to be thrown out. So to me, that was intentional. So what do you think about that? 9,000 illegal immigrants had their deportation hearings thrown out due to clerical error.
I think our judicial system is terribly broken and allows itself to be open for abuse. And I'm not sure whether it's the judge. Most clerical errors that would happen in a normal case would be simply corrected and the case would proceed. Here, I think the judges are looking for errors and a basis to throw the cases out in some jurisdictions. And frankly, I think they ought to be thrown off the bench. Now, where there's substantive
But you don't think that
errors,
starts with the attorneys who wrote up?
no, I don't think so. I think there's two kinds of clerical errors. Like some could be misspellings, like incorrect dates, omissions, and intentional or not. That could be readily fixed, and I think in most cases those would just simply be fixed and proceed. In this
And that's
case,
the point I'm making. We're talking 9,000. So when I was studying to be a paralegal, the paralegal usually writes up the legal documents. The attorney proofreads them to make sure everything is appropriate. And here, these documents left the attorney's offices and made it to the courts. That to me seems like that's the attorneys and the judges going along with it as well. I'm not saying that the judges aren't suspect in this, but I believe they're both in cahoots, and it started in the attorney's office. That's the way I feel.
To me, that this is all within the Department of Justice at a federal level, in the Attorney General's office. Yes, pushing those through, and I don't know whether those errors were made on the side of the Attorney General or the defendant, but
because I do see what you're saying. The court makes the dates and times for the court hearings. So I hear what you're saying.
I just, I think it's systemic, and I think it starts at the very idea of crossing the borders where it starts. The caravan's evidence that it starts well before the border. They get to the border. I wouldn't be surprised if attorneys are opting in to act as their public defendant and doing what they can to
we have the
do what they can to protect
ACLU,
them.
and lawyers is just something every attorney in this country has to do. They have to give certain amount of pro bono hours. So you think about that and you look at the civil rights attorneys. So yeah, a lot of these illegal immigrants are getting free legal representation. Now, do you think Mexico is going to do their part and keep the refugees on their side of the border like the Mexican ambassador to the United States said they're going to do?
I sure hope so. I think they're going to do it given the recent trade agreement that's been put in place. I think there'll be a lot of cooperation between now and then. I also believe that the National Guard is likely to get called in again because a certain portion of that caravan is going to make its way to our border.
So you don't think Mexico is going to do what they're supposed to do?
I think they're going to give I mean, this is a massive amount of people, and I'm saying that inevitably there's going to be a swell, thousands that are going to hit our border no matter what Mexico does.
Okay. So let's get into your book because now what made you write the book Trump Why He Is Right for America? Explain that. I've read the book. I've had it since earlier this year, maybe into last year when I first started interviewing you. It's a great read. It's not a long read, people. It's about 40 pages, I think. So what made you write that book?
Well, it's essentially myself capturing essays and discussions I had with my colleagues. As you know, I'm an American citizen. I'm working in Canada, and the election was the most contentious and popular election that we've had, and it was that way during the primaries as well as the general election. So when there was still 17 people running for the Republican nomination, I was predicting Trump's the right man for America and defending him to the Canadian colleagues who did not appreciate his demeanor and didn't think he had a chance. And it was interesting from an international perspective that they didn't understand American politics and relied on myself to sort of bring them up to speed. And what happened was I saw so many people asking the same types of question, not understanding the basic elements of our Constitution and the culture of, America's self-sufficiency to properly contextualize the discussions happening. And this was my effort to capture that for them initially. And after they read it, they felt like there was enough there that they convinced me that Americans could make use of it as well. And so I published that. I think it was in September of long before Trump got the Republican nomination. I published it on Kindle so that others would have access to it. Okay. And it's been great. I've gotten a lot of discussion started because of this book.
Okay, so why don't you read something from the chapter Build the Wall? Because I know I definitely want people to hear that. Because it's amazing. You were way ahead of the wall building before President Trump even won the primary.
Exactly, and I think I was the first one to publish anything that talked about globalism versus nationalism. Right. I heard nothing about that early in the primary, but I thought it was the single key feature and put it front and center in my book. But let me focus on Build the Wall. So I'm going to read a short excerpt. I hope listeners, can follow along on the screen here. But if not, the book is available within Kindle, and it's very inexpensive, I think $2. So you can pick that up if you like and have a short read. So here it is, Build the Wall. Universal is the notion that all nations, both the right and the responsibility to protect its borders. So much so that Ronald Reagan offered the following: a nation that cannot control its borders is simply not a nation. Those who have within themselves any aspiration will acknowledge the following: individuals represented by their circumstance in one nation will with great vigor seek a better position, either by defying the constraints placed upon them by their current citizenship, or by seeking in nations whose rules more favorably facilitate the well-being of their progeny. America is widely acknowledged as the land of opportunity, where any hard-working and law-abiding citizen may find security with some personal sacrifice. Prosperity is the result. In our harbor, this call is captured by a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is imprisoned, lighting, and her name Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. The rights and liberties established by our founding fathers, brought by impassioned spirit, the spent blood of our Revolutionary War heroes, still receive with a global appeal. This was the imprint on the Statue of Liberty as you arrive in the port of New York. But let me continue here just a brief bit with. I'll just skip ahead to Thomas Jefferson, what he says, and I think this really captures what most of us think. And this was written in 1801. Born in other countries, yet believing you could be happy in this, our laws acknowledge, as they should do, your right to join us in society, conforming, as I doubt not you will do, to established rules, that these rules shall be as equal as prudential considerations will admit, will certainly be the aim of our legislatures, generals, and in particular. And that was Thomas Jefferson in May 2nd, 1801. And I think we've certainly lost our way far from what Thomas Jefferson envisioned.
So, what do you think is going to happen with the wall? Are we going to get this thing built? Because I'm looking at the midterm election, and I'm concerned with rhinos. I'm concerned with complacency on when it comes to the voters on the right. If we get rhinos in there, and especially if we don't spread the majority, we only have a 51 one person majority. That's not really a majority. So, do you think we're going to be able to get this wall built with the people that we have running now and the incumbents that we have? How realistic do you think it is without making some type of deal for DACA?
Without making some type of deal for DACA?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. There's been a lot of push for that on both sides of the aisle. Frankly, I think it really comes down to what it is we do during this midterm. If we do not vote MAGA, if you don't vote to make America great again, there's not going to be an America to keep great. So
now, when you say MAGA, are you just referring to Republican candidates, or are you also looking at independent Republican candidates? Because there are a lot of rhinos in this race.
Well, I'm not a vote red, vote blue, or vote white. I'm about making America great again. So I think the way people ought to go to the polls is they ought to follow Trump's endorsement. If you like someone that's going to be protecting our borders and someone that's going to focus on America first and grow our economy and give people of all dimensions, socioeconomic dimensions, a chance at jobs. You like the fact that we have more jobs than we have people applying for them. If you want that, then you need to find a candidate that Trump has endorsed and vote for him and give Trump a chance to push through his agenda.
But see, the thing about that is there are certain candidates President Trump really can endorse because they're independent Republicans. So for him to endorse an independent Republican versus one that's running as a Republican, that wouldn't be a good optic. I tend to look at which Republicans that he's not endorsing. One in particular, Bob Hugin, the rhino from New Jersey, basically an admitted rhino. He doesn't even want President Trump campaigning for him. He said as much when he was on Neil Cavuto, I think, this week. So what about in those situations where President Trump isn't going to endorse a Republican? To me, that should let the voters know that something's wrong with that candidate if he doesn't want President Trump to campaign for him and President Trump hasn't even mentioned his name. So how do we get the voters to realize that and then look towards the independent Republican, no matter what state they represent?
I would say it simply as this. If you have a Republican in your district that does not receive a Trump endorsement, you should be looking for another candidate because that is not a Trump ally.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's even worse. It's even worse than having the opposition party in the sense that at least you know where they stand.
Yeah.
These Republican candidates that are not behind protecting our borders, when it comes down to the vote on any issue, you're simply not going to know where they stand, and they're going to be essentially traitors from the inside, and you can almost guarantee they're going to be working against you. So in those
crazy.
In that situation, pick anybody else, pick any independent candidate, and vote for that person. Don't stay at home, cast a vote, but cast a vote against the rhino.
What's crazy about that is Hugan is open about him not supporting Trump's agenda. He's open about the fact that he's pro-abortion. Yet people still, for some crazy reason, fear a split of the ticket by voting for an independent Republican such as Tricia Flanagan. So I'm kind of confused at how we have voters out here that call themselves Republicans. They know what Hugan has said, that he doesn't support our president's agenda, that he is pro-abortion, and that he will vote along with the governor of New Jersey that has turned it into a sanctuary state. I don't get what more could be done unless we have false Republican voters. I don't get it.
So Republican voters need to turn out en masse, and they need to vote against this type of candidate because a traitor within is more dangerous than an opponent identified. And so if he's openly anti-Make America Great Again, he's a Democrat. You might as well just, he's a Democrat wearing an elephant.
Right.
We can't have that. I don't want that. Any other candidate is better. Any other candidate.
Now, what's it looking like? What's it looking like in your state, in Ohio?
We have there are a few key districts, but it looks like a broad red wave. I think you're going to see the really key race, and it doesn't look good, is Sherrod Brown looks like he will hold the Senate seat. We need that to flip. And we've got a Trump-endorsed candidate running on the Republican ticket. In fact, I was not at all opposed when I heard Trump endorse. I happily bowed out. I did not keep a campaign running for a write-in candidacy. I did not, split the conversation and have been supportive of the candidacy. So in Ohio, in the state of Ohio, I think you can pretty much vote down the ticket, and most of the rhinos have been weeded out, given that Kasich no longer will be governor and no longer will run the party.
And I agree with one of the people at Periscope. That's why the primaries are so important, because the primary is where our vote really does count, because we choose the candidate instead of letting the establishment choose the candidate. I want to get into another chapter of your book, Commander in Tweet, and I wanted to touch on that chapter because we see everything that's going down with the shadow bans and the Twitter locking people out of their accounts. Earlier this week, Gretchen, who runs Code of Vets, Twitter had the audacity to lock her out 3 times, and really for no reason, although Jack did what he always does and opens the account back up. So before we get into your chapter, how do you feel about the censorship that's going on with Twitter, and in particular blocking Gretchen, again, the owner of Code of Vets? She does nothing but Periscope videos representing our veterans, bringing awareness to what they go through, and Twitter had the audacity to lock her out 3 separate times. How do you feel about that?
Simply stated, there should be no censorship whatsoever. I feel that these platforms are open media, and they should not be managed by like a private network. They either live up to what they profess to be, an open area for open conversations between individuals, and if they're not that, then how do we solve that? I am not a big fan of big government, so I'm not sure I'm a fan of us regulating Twitter or Facebook.
I don't want them to regulate it. I don't want them to regulate it at all. I really think it's as simple as I think it's as simple as people choosing to go to another social network. They're free. Why give these people like Jack and Mark Zuckerberg the power over us when we can go somewhere else? and not leave it to government to have to regulate?
We don't have to wait for the midterms to vote. We vote every single day with our dollars, and every single day with our subscriptions, and every single day with our likes and retweets. We vote every day. If they're banning you, and I think the chief and I have both been shadow banned on Twitter and remain shadow banned on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I lose followers inexplicably, and I have people that I stopped following being refollowed that I never clicked, opted back into following them. So I know some things are going on behind, but I'm not going to worry about how we should organize and transfer to a new platform. I think that might be the right idea, but I guarantee you, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram would immediately change their policies if they lost 50% of
That's the point I'm making.
their base. If we just disappeared, even for a little while, and even just the number of tweets, I'm not even sure we have to delete our accounts to stop using the platform. They are going to notice, and they will take an advertising hit, and that will affect their bottom lines, and they will come back to a place where they want to serve us. Everybody in the world wants to come to America and serve our population because we are numerous and we are good consumers, active consumers. An American company based here can't afford to walk away from serving us.
True that. All right, let's get into your chapter, Commander in Tweet. What made you write this chapter?
Everybody thinks that it's audacious for our president to talk directly to us, but I'm going to say that's what got him elected. The fact that he can go straight to, 65 million followers and 300 million voters in America. Every tweet gets reported. This is an amazing way for Donald J. Trump to connect with the average American, the public, in an uncensored format.
And that's what's crazy. Even he's shadow banned with all of those followers. He's not even reaching half of his audience. So read an excerpt from the book so people can check it out. I've seen a couple people on Periscope saying that they're going to get your book, actually. And that's why you're here. It can't always be about the news, people. It can't always be something exciting. This is about teaching the people so you guys understand more reasons why Trump is right for America. Kevin wrote this book during the primary election. And if you read it, you'll see how accurate he was as far as predicting President Trump's win, why he would win, and even down to the point of using Twitter to be his voice to we the people. And that's why I think it's so interesting, because again, he didn't write this book like many people. They wrote theirs after President Trump won. He wrote his book while President Trump was battling during the primaries, and that's why it's still relevant to this day.
Oh, and if you think people in America who wear the red cap are treated badly, try walking the streets of Toronto in such an outfit. But when he came down the escalator, I was a big fan, and I was supporting him from that moment forward. So let me read a short excerpt here from Commander in Tweet. Donald J. Trump speaks to the American public in a manner greatly underappreciated by the educated elite. Like the scientist or lawyer who requires pages to convey even the simplest thought, today's political body is unable to articulate themselves clearly. Because established politicians fear being accountable for actions, they rely on a dull drumming of insane platitudes to lull into mass hypnosis the great proportion of our public body. From the doldrums, incumbent politicians can realize a near certainty of re-election. By doing nothing and saying of substance even less, 98% of incumbents safely pad their pensions. Meanwhile, the American electorate wrestle with underemployment, fiscal insecurity, and personal empowerment. Trump, on the other hand, has no political training, As such, he is able to articulate his message in less than 140 characters. Now he has 280. Surprisingly, this is an incredibly effective at capturing the support of a record number of Republicans and a growing number of independents. Ira Cobb of the Huffington Post reported in May of 2016 that Trump has figured out how to use words that everyone will understand. He says, "This offends people that like to think of themselves as more intelligent and more sophisticated, but it makes his message clear enough to everyone listening. It will be welcomed by the American public for Trump to speak from the Oval Office in words charged with principled messaging, making clear his intent and holding accountable all those who speak rhetorically." And I guess that's where I'd like to end, because that is exactly what he's doing, and it's frustrating the hell out of other politicians and driving the Democrats absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Just look what happened in the Kavanaugh hearings.
But I like the fact that you mentioned these politicians and pundits. They can't seem to get their point across within a whole paragraph. All of the legal jargon and things like that. Do you think they do that purposely to go over a lot of people's heads as far as the viewers and constituents?
Let me start with the politician. I know absolutely for a fact they do that purposefully. I was advised by my campaign manager not to be precise in my promises, not to address any issue of substance, simply to make people aware of who I am. That was their strategy. That was their recommendation.
Whoa, let's go back. Your campaign manager told you basically to talk over the heads of your constituents?
Not talk over the heads, to speak to platitudes and to just let them know who I am, and basically run I don't know, it's sort of like running for president of school council. It's a popularity game, right? Yeah. I wanted to be the solutions candidate, so I refused, and I didn't use the manager very long. But the point being is that is a tactic for politicians to not say anything, just to focus on platitudes. If you listen to any of Hillary Clinton's election speeches, and I know it's hard to do, I can't stand it either, but if you take the time and just listen to a few excerpts, you'll see there are platitudes that even you and I have trouble disagreeing with, but they say absolutely nothing. They promise absolutely, even less, and that's the real problem. And pundits have the same idea.
It's funny you mentioned the word promise. On OAN, they run this kind of a commercial about Governor Moonbeam out there in California, and it's from the 80s, I think, and he's literally saying that he lied and all politicians lie with their promises. I mean, he's literally saying that everything he said on the campaign trail when he was running for governor at that time, I guess, maybe 90s, maybe not the 80s. They don't have the date up there. But he literally admits that he lied to the voters. And yet and still, this man is governor again. So it seems like whether they're using platitudes or they're coming and telling the truth that they're lying, people will still vote them back in. I don't understand that.
Oh, we love a good vision, and we really make judgments about personalities relatively superficially. So we look at a person and do they look trustworthy? We have a lot of unconscious and even perhaps conscious biases that drive our support. And the politicians and marketing professionals and broadcasters know this, and that's why they don't get deep into substance, because they're not there to provide a solution. They're there to shine a light on the controversy. So the bigger the divide they can create, the more profitable it is for them and for all the pundits that sit on the shelves of those that great chasm between the popular the two popular parties.
I hear you. All right, right quick before we get to while you were distracted, I want to let the people know that the No Commie Crats Allowed shirts and hoodies are out. Give you a picture of them right there. You can now get your No Commie Crats Allowed shirts and hoodies right there on the bottom at www.bonfire.com/no-commie-crats-allowed. I have shirts, hoodies, long sleeve sweatshirts, and I even have the women's slim fit shirts. So I got them all for you. Let these commie crats know how you feel. Get your No Commie Crats Allowed gear. All right, so you mean to tell me that the American people, regardless of demographic, they can't tell the difference between a person that has told them a lie, admitted to lying, and they'll still vote that person in? And you say because the American people, not all, but there's a good amount of American people that like a show? I done it to him again.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I got
Did
you.
you cut me off, man?
I had to.
Hey, you've been holding out on me. I want one of those shirts. That's the first time I've seen it, everyone. So
I just got them done today.
Hey, I'm going to the URL to buy now. So thank you very
deal.
much. That's what I'm going to do after this. I
Good
do
deal.
want to say, yes, you characterize it in a much more vivid way than I tell the story, but it's true. We grew up on the fairy tales, so we like the picture that people paint for us, and we act upon that. And so, yeah, I hate to say it, but it takes a great deal of work, a great deal of effort that very few people are willing to put in place to be able, or to be in a position to call anybody out on a particular issue. But what Trump did, and what the DNC is beginning to realize, is that once you get a straight talker, that someone that says what he thinks, what's on his mind, people relate to that.
So
And
that's
that's
why
why,
they're so blunt about the fact that they're socialists. That you think that's why they're coming out and saying, "Hey, we're socialists. We're going to raise your taxes if we win the majority. Free college tuition. We're going to let more illegals in, possibly give them the right to vote on a local and state level." You think it's because President Trump is just so out front and blunt with what he says, and the commie crats have said, "Oh wow, it works, so we're gonna be like that," and they're admitting to their Marxist ways now. You think that's why?
yeah, and what they missed, though, what they really missed, so they heard that direct messaging works, platitudes do not work, uh, direct messaging motivates and activates people. And they saw it not only in Trump, but the special elections that happened. So they know it works, and their poll shows that it works. So they've been they're going straight to direct messaging, but they got it wrong. They forgot that it's direct messaging, because Trump is actually a centrist. He's not an extremist. He's not on the extreme right of the Republican Party.
No.
He's a centrist. And so he's talking to the mass of America, and that's why he resonates with us. And it's not just because he's direct, but the Democrats, like they always do, they got about half the story right. So they feel they can just say anything, and as
Think
long
they
as
got
they
half
say
the
it,
story right?
in this
Being
scenario
kinda
where they're
nice,
only
man.
in this scenario where they only have two pieces, where one, you got to say a direct messaging. What they missed is that you've got to run down the middle. You've got to talk a reasonable platform, and I don't think even a stalwart Democrat will actually vote to replace our Constitution and make us become a Marxist socialist republic. I
Wait,
do not see it
say that
happen.
again. You don't think a commie-crat would do that?
I don't think even a hardened Democrat from Main Street will vote for anyone that says they want to replace our Constitution and become a socialist nation like some of our Democratic candidates are running. You can be rest assured this is a test. This is a test for America as to whether or not we will accept willfully a socialist government. They are testing whether or not they can replace the Constitution.
You
That's
know,
what this election's about.
you may be onto something there because Doug Alexander, um, if I'm not mistaken, he was President Clinton's pollster, if I'm not mistaken. He said last night on Fox News at Night or whatever it's called, Democrats, speaking of the voters, have made it clear they want new young leadership. And he says that people like Schumer and Pelosi should move over, bring in new young leaders with the centrist view. So you may be onto something. I've even been hearing calls for Crooked Hillary to finally shut her mouth. But do you think that the old blood in the Commie-Crat Party, the Pelosi's, the Waters, the Schumers, do you think that they're going to relinquish their power to new young blood, to people like Ocasio-Cortez or Gillum, should he win his race?
Does any dictator give over their reign without a fight?
True, true. With
Not a
that
chance.
said, let's get into my new segment. I want to see how you feel about some of this news that the media isn't covering. I call it While You Were Distracted, and I call it that because of all of the distractions from the mainstream media that keep people from being informed about so much news that's happening in America. You know, they have people with tunnel vision, basically, to where they're just zoned in on a few subjects that they decide to talk about. So here's the first one. Conservatives fear Trump will cut immigration deal. Conservatives are growing worried that President Trump and GOP leaders will strike a slimmed-down immigration deal during the lame duck session if Democrats win back the House in November. Republicans fear that who relishes in the role of deal maker would be eager to Republicans fear that Trump, who relishes in the role of deal maker, will be eager to provide protection for hundreds of thousands of so-called dreamers in exchange for a $25 billion border wall, and that he might do so without getting any other concessions from Democrats if he thinks it's his last chance to secure funding for the wall. Do you think that's what we're coming down to?
We need the wall. It cost us, there was a number, I think it's $140 billion annually, just to serve the people seeking refugee status. So if you build the wall, it's going to be well worth any concessions. Truth is, I think the only immigration policy that makes sense for America, and probably any other country that wants to retain its culture, is that we should be doing replacement level immigration only.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you're still the only person that I've heard speak on that. You've spoken about that replenishment level immigration on my show many times, and I still haven't heard anyone think about that. Explain to people what replenished level immigration is.
Well, you can think of the organic growth of a population. So we have children being born, and we have persons that pass, and that has a net effect on the population. And so as long as we're giving, birth to, two person, one, if we have more births than we have deaths, then, or actually people can leave the country too. But if we have more births than deaths, the population grows. We also have people wanting to come into our country and people wanting to leave our country. And if we have more people coming into our country, then our population also grows. What people don't realize is where those two come together and really are endangering our core culture. I'm going to call it Americanism, whereby people want to live by the values and ideals that have established America, the core ideas of a melting pot. So what happens is they've passed some laws in the mid 1900s, let's just say, and basically it gave large quotas to every single country in the nation. So now instead of having European quotas come in and we limit it to about 40,000 people coming in, we have something in the order of 1,900 persons from each and every country are allowed to come in. And what you need to understand is the majority of those countries do not respect constitutionalism, do not respect freedom of religion or freedom of speech, and so have cultures that are.
They
Yeah,
also don't respect assimilation because, like someone on Periscope just said, it's not about blending with our culture. It's about bringing their culture. They don't want to learn ours, and we must assimilate to their culture. And that's like one of the biggest problems when it comes to immigration, legal or illegal.
yeah. So let me just finish off with this to answer your question. I got on a bit of a tangent there. About 400,000 immigrants would be replacement level. We are letting in somewhere close to 1.4 million, so about a million extra. And that million extra, about 80% of that are people that do not share our cultural values. Those people are having more children than
Americans
the
are.
American citizens are,
Yeah.
and the Europeans that come here that respect and honor our traditions. So what we're having, when you tally all of this up year after year compounded, what you're going to find out is that
We're,
we
go-
are very near the
we're gonna
breaking
have
point.
we're gonna have more foreigners than Americans, American-born Americans.
We're going to have more people that have come from socialist governments that think that's the appropriate way to govern, even though they came here because their country's in a shamble.
Right. I
That's
gotta
the
move. I
problem.
I gotta keep it moving though, because I got two more
Yep.
to get to.
Sorry,
Um.
man.
All right. All right. Trump takes aim at Cuba, holds Havana responsible for Venezuelan crisis. The White House planned to turn up the pressure on Cuba for its role in what a senior administration official on Wednesday said was its efforts to subvert democracy in Venezuela and propping up President Nicolas Maduro. The senior administration official, I got to get this off here, sorry, people. The senior administration official said Maduro would be out of power if it wasn't for the Cuban intelligence operatives who help him control restless Venezuelans and block efforts to replace him. The issue of Cuba involvement in Venezuela is a fact. It's not a theory, said the official, briefing reporters on condition of anonymity per administration policy. President Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, will unveil more details on the work of Cuban operatives in Venezuela, but the senior administration official said the United States plans to ratchet up its pressure on Cuba, especially the Cuban military that assists with Venezuela's intelligence and counterintelligence efforts. Now, President Trump last year kicked nearly two-thirds of Cuba's embassy personnel out of the United States and pulled many American diplomats from the U.S. embassy after the sonic attacks that took place in Cuba last year. Now, naturally, Cuba didn't take any blame for it, but it's known that they had everything to do with it. And for those that don't remember, last year, some of our embassy personnel and ambassadors were in Cuba, and there was some type of sonic weapon that was used against them in their hotel rooms. Even their families that were with them got injured. Sometime it was eyesight, sometime it was loss of hearing, concussions, just different things. These weapons do exist. So what do you have to say about that, Kevin? As far as we may be heading towards high tensions with Cuba at this point.
Well, if they are using such weapons and they choose to use them recklessly, uh, especially against civilians, then I think Congress has the responsibility to declare war and begin to take action. I do not like America, State Department being involved in nation building and do not particularly care whether Cuba is influencing Venezuela or not. I think we ought to take a more laissez-faire approach. You can go back to the Monroe Doctrine, and or you can go all the way back to George Washington. There's some my quotes in my book that talk about George Washington saying that any agreements between countries should be purely economic or transactional in nature and should not mix social policy with economic policy. Of course, he didn't use exactly those words, but he was much more eloquent than I. But the bottom line is no trade agreement should be tied to humanitarian considerations, and certainly we should not be interfering with somebody else's political structure whatsoever. If we do, then we invite them to do unto us what we do to them.
So you think that's what's going on? Because Venezuela itself is a lot deeper. I mean, you look at the sanctions we have on Venezuela concerning the oil, for instance. A lot of people don't know that China is a big buyer of Venezuelan oil. So much so that the sanctions we have against Venezuela, China gets their oil off the top and it's set aside. So it's multinational. It's not just America involved in Venezuela, but at the same time, are we supposed to sit back while their citizens can't even afford to buy toilet paper? I mean, we're talking inflation at 1,000,000%. That's unheard of. So I understand when you say America shouldn't be involved in nation building. I agree with that 100%. But how can we sit back and watch a country have 1,000,000% inflation, citizens that are now eating out of garbage for the most part, grocery store shelves empty, can't even get the day-to-day toilet paper, toiletry items? I mean, how could we call ourselves the leader of the free world if we were to sit back and just watch that happen?
Well, you're just you're beginning to sound like one of those commie-crats. I'm thinking the
No,
way I
because
look at.
no, do not. I wish you had done that early in the show. Would have woke me up. Don't do that, because I'm talking about getting rid of Marxism out in Venezuela. I'm not saying go out there and have it, because the Marxism is what created the environment to where you have 1,000,000% inflation, to where the citizens can't get the day-to-day goods they need. And I'm definitely not about that.
And I'm certainly not heartless either, but in I don't know how to say this kindly, but if you do not allow a state to fail, will be no examples to show that this type of government structure that
Doesn't work.
that the UN is being modeled around does not work.
Yeah, but at the
And
same
so,
time, it's
what
these
cost?
it's these failed
I mean,
states that are creating a lot of the refugees, the immigrants that we're having a problem with, such as the caravan, or just on a day-to-day basis. So it's already failing. The world sees that it's failing. How long are we supposed to let it fail before we do something? Because again, it's countries like Venezuela that produce the majority of the immigrants. And if they're going to come here and we don't do anything to try to fix their country, I didn't say take it over a nation build, but if we don't do something, maybe not just us, but even with some allies, but something has to be done, because if we just turn a blind eye and let them fail, which they already have, then we have the problem at our borders that we have now.
well, democracies at the threshold of socialism. So just making a country democratic does not make it a constitutional republic. The way I look at it, if we want to do something, first we got to lead by example. So we've got to get our citizens that are struggling with the same types of food insecurity and fear for their safety. We've got to protect them first. Then we can then we can lead by example, and people can say, hey, our circumstance is unacceptable. Look at that country over there, and they can see what we're doing differently. And what we're doing differently is we're a constitutional republic. And
Exactly.
if we're going to help build them, then we need to make them a constitutional republic. And I can
Well,
almost guarantee you none of their leaders will allow it, but what they will allow is election. But elections don't change anything because it doesn't change the form of government.
right. I'm not necessarily
And
saying
so
go over there and nation build,
the
but
problem never goes away, Chief. We can give
yeah,
them billions of dollars. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to fly them into the United States so that we can take care of them, so that they don't have
now
to
you
march
sound
through
like a commie
Mexico?
crap. Now you
No,
sound
I'm
like a
not going to do
commie
that.
crap because I
I,
definitely don't want that to happen. I'm just saying if we can't just sit back and watch them
but
fail to do nothing. But
if you
let's move
can't
on
solve it
because
in their own, if you can't solve it in their own country, then the only other solution is shipping them to other countries so that they now have the problem. I prefer not to have that problem. I can fix your problem in Venezuela if you're willing to model yourself after America and become a constitutional
but
government
then
with our protections.
that takes regime change, and that's what so many
That
people are afraid of. I saw
and
someone
they
say earlier
and they have to.
that it didn't work in Libya, but the intent in Libya, what many people don't know, under the commie-crats, Crooked Hillary and Obama, was to remove their leadership and replace it with Muslim Brotherhood leadership. Libya was never meant to be created in the form of America. Never was. It was a total farce. They wanted to put Muslim Brotherhood leadership in Libya as well as Egypt, and it's very easy to locate much documentation on that. I was talking to someone on Periscope, Kevin.
Yeah.
So Libya is a different case. But let's move on to the last one.
Let me have one point, if I may. Just one
Go
final
ahead.
point on this. That change will not come from America or any other country. The only person that's going to make that change is internal to that country.
Okay, gotcha. All right, this is the last one. SCOTUS may consider Down syndrome abortion a Down sy- SCOTUS may consider Down syndrome abortion ban in what would be a pivotal case for disability rights. Indiana Attorney General Curtis Hill asked the Supreme Court Friday to rule on a 2016 law which bans abortions that are chosen solely due to a parental diagnosis of Down syndrome. In his petition, Hill argues that the state's ban merits consideration in light of eugenics concerns raised due to the high Down syndrome abortion rates following advances in parental genetic testing. Planned Parenthood and the American Civil Liberties Union sued over the law shortly after its passage and succeeded in getting a Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals rule against the measure, finding it to be unconstitutional. Hill's petition to the Supreme Court makes the case that Indiana's provision is a new type of abortion restriction and one that does not unduly burden a woman's constitutional right to choose abortion. The non-discrimination provision is qualitatively new type of abortion regulation, one that neither implicates the concerns underlying Roe and Casey nor burdens the right those cases ultimately protect, he writes. What's your thought on that?
If I recall, that decision was pretty narrow, and it will go to the Supreme Court, and there will probably be a narrow victory there as well. So let's start with one thing. I'm about choice. So people should be allowed the right to have an abortion, but the federal government should have zero involvement, and that certainly means zero funding of Planned Parenthood for these types of activities. And it certainly, in my impression, should not weigh in as to whether or not someone is capable or allowed to have abortions. I think this is a state issue, if not possibly a municipal issue, if not possibly individual.
You know what I think
Like
is going on?
go ahead.
I think it's an attempt to put Kavanaugh back in the spotlight because from day one, they were so concerned with him overturning Roe versus Wade. And I was telling people that he can't just go in there and say, let's take a look at Roe versus Wade. There has to be some type of case that's brought to the Supreme Court. And here we are. And of all things, they use Down syndrome children. I think it's really to put Kavanaugh back in the spotlight and to see what his decision is going to be on this. I truly do.
Frankly, I have no problems with that. Let's visit it and let's find out. But what I have a problem with is oh my God, the lack of moral compass shown by the left in this election cycle, or since Trump's been elected. It has just devolved to a place that I can't even comprehend. A grown adult acting in the way that I see Hillary asking people to act, to basically track down and stalk people that disagree with you. So the only way to satisfy some of the left, or the leadership of the left, is to, you're free to make a decision so long as I agree with you. And
yeah, pretty much.
That's not what the country's about, and that's not freedom of choice. If I welcome the spotlight, because I think it shows just how desperate they are, just how much they're in survival mode. I live in, I'm working in a country where political parties come and go and evolve. Some would say, others would say
So
fail.
if Kavanaugh,
DNC is in that realm right now. I would not be surprised if the DNC does not exist 5 years from today.
if Kavanaugh votes that women that are carrying babies that have Down syndrome, they can't have their abortions, you don't think the Democrats are going to come out screaming, we told you he was anti-abortion, he's going to overturn Roe versus Wade?
I don't think he'd vote that way. The Constitution says that we should not intervene in that manner. So I would welcome the scrutiny. I think the Constitution will hold that the mother owns the right to what happens to her body and a person in the womb.
No doubt. All right, we ran a little over time. We're going to wrap it up. And I want to thank everybody on Periscope for joining. Same with the people on YouTube. Some great comments. I'm sure Kevin will hopefully be back next Thursday. We'll be closer to the election, so we'll definitely be talking about the election and see what's going on. And yep, we're going to be talking about the Democrats losing their mind, because that happens every week. So again, I want to thank all the viewers. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for the shares. Much love to all of y'all. Stay safe and stay blessed.
This is
Talking to you soon, Mama Bear.
This is a snowflake-free zone.
Cheef report. The Cheef report. The Cheef report.
This is a snowflake-free
Cheef
zone.
report. The Cheef report. The Cheef report.
This is a snowflake-free
Cheef
zone.
report. The Cheef report. The Cheef report.
This is a snowflake-free
Cheef
zone.
report.